The National Basketball Association playoffs continue, and they will do so without LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, as LA goes down against the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 5 of their series in Los Angeles, giving the T-Wolves a 4-1 series victory. Now, I would just like to state, I think that LA lost this series in Game 4. We talked about it on the show previously. The issues that the Lakers had in putting Minnesota away and only using their 5 guys and having LeBron and Luka beaten up and battered by the end of that game, so they're kind of dragging ass, allowing Minnesota to have that comeback. I think that was a real tactical disadvantage, and I don't think it's a surprise that now LeBron and Luka each end up getting banged up in this elimination game. I can understand the desperation of the situation, and I understand that in the playoffs you have to shorten your bench, but you still have to use it. And you cannot rely on the guy who is 40 and the guy who got traded away whilst being an all-time talent for physical issues. I don't think you can rely on those guys for a full no-sitting half, and I think that ends up costing them here. But this is... I'm going back and forth on how strongly to go in on this Lakers loss. Because on the one hand, this is bad, right? Like, you have a dynamic duo of LeBron and Luka. You have, like, one of the greatest players in the history of the sport, and a guy who could, by the end of his career, get into that conversation as well. That's how talented Luka Doncic is. He is genuinely one of the most talented human beings to play this sport ever. You have both of those guys, you should at least be able to play 6 games in the playoffs. So, on the one hand, when you have LeBron in year 22, and you are able to get the fleecing of the century and get Luka Doncic, and you only get to Game 5 of the playoffs, that is a failure. I don't think there is any way to look at it other than this is a failure for the Los Angeles Lakers. The future is set up well, but a big part of this is winning in the here and the now when you have LeBron James in year 22. And to be the higher seed, have home court advantage, and blow it in the ways that the Lakers did is almost inexcusable. And it goes back, it is tough to criticize the front office when they make the trade of the century, the heist of the century in acquiring Luka Doncic. But the ways that they lost were very predictable. Is that they couldn't defend in the paint at all. And they tried to make the move, and then the guy was hurt, and they ended up canceling it. And maybe they probably just should have overlooked a couple of things and made that move anyway, because it very much cost them in this. And so it is a bad loss for the Lakers. And you get Luka, so it's tough to say that this season is a failure, but this series is a failure, and a pretty big one from a Lakers standpoint. Now, you don't want to overreact, because this season overall, you get Luka. So I would probably put it in the win column. And you have gone from a team where in a couple of seasons it looks bleak to a team where in a couple of seasons you still have a guy who might at that point be the best player in basketball. And you now get to have him hanging out with LeBron, who excels in basically every area that you would want Luka to get improved in. And so while Luka does like to go off and have some fun in the summer, and such is his right to do, every moment he is on North American soil, I would have him attached to the hip of LeBron James to figure out what it is that makes LeBron, and how Luka can get to those levels as well. And so when you were talking about building out a foundation, there's obviously a solid one out there in LA, and it is 1 or 2 moves that can really help kind of solidify this thing and really get them to where they want to get to in probably a very quick time. So this feels really bad from a Lakers standpoint. On the one hand, it feels like a giant waste, but on the other hand, it did kind of feel like, I don't want to say just like a wasted season, because, well, you got Luka halfway through. That is a good thing to get Luka. That is in no way an inconvenience, but this team was not built to have Luka Doncic come in and lose Anthony Davis. This team was not maximized or built to really maximize what those two guys have. So now that you have a full offseason to really build a team around the strengths and weaknesses of those two particular players, I think that they're going to be in a very good shape. So I think this was, as much as you don't want to waste a year of LeBron at 22 years old still being amazing, I do still think there was a little bit of trial and error, and let's see what happens here. Look, Jackson Hayes was not good in the early part of this series. I don't think he was so bad that while Rudy Gobert is looking like Shaq in 01 against you, that you can't even throw him out there for a couple of minutes and, well, let's just see if he can slow the guy down a little bit. So, like, I think that JJ kind of got in his head a little bit. I think he coached like this was his first time coaching in the playoffs. I think he's going to grow from this as well. But I do think when you look at this series, all credit to Minnesota, and we'll talk about them in a second. And we'll have a lot of time to talk about Laker offseason as it starts now. But I think this was more the Lakers lost this series than Minnesota came out and took it. A couple of good things for the Lakers. I guess one, Rui Hachimura, I think, had a real good run of good performances here for Los Angeles. He became a real weapon. And it was to the point where I was, again, coming out of game 4, like, why not just let Rui and the Blowfish go for a couple of minutes and let LeBron and Luka sit over on the sidelines and just catch their breath and take a load off for a second so that they can freshen up and get back out there and be effective in winning time in that game, because Rui was playing that well. And so that is a real weapon that they have in Rui Hachimura, I think, going forward. The Reeves part of it is a little bit concerning. This is a tough matchup for him. It's a good Minnesota defensive team, but they took him away. They completely took Reeves out of this series, and Rui tried to make up for that a little bit, but Rui, I think if he made up for Reeves, he just barely did, and then now he needed to also add himself into that too. So that was a performance, and that was a series that I think Reeves now has to learn from a little bit. He is a really, really good number 3 option, maybe the best number 3 option in the playoffs. But this was a bad one for him. On the Minnesota side, while just saying that the Lakers lost this more than Minnesota won this was the type of performance that Minnesota dreams of. Not necessarily the Anthony Edwards part of it, but to be able to close out LeBron James and Luka Doncic while Edwards is having an off night and you miss like 18 shots in a row from 3. By the way, I don't think that's being hyperbolic. The fact that you can do that is monumental for this franchise. And I said before, like last playoffs, they make their way to the Western Conference Finals. So obviously a good run for this basketball team. But this felt like a real, again, leveling up series for Minnesota to be able to just really shut down the Lakers for extended stretches and be able to have a lot of success. And again, we talked about it coming into this series. The way that the Lakers struggle are the ways that Minnesota can attack teams. They lined up really well, and you kind of wish you would have saw that more and just not got hard eyes emojis for the star talent on the Lakers, because this was going to be a tough matchup for Los Angeles, and I think we just kind of got lost in it a little bit. But this is a grown win for Minnesota. That this is the type of response after last year that I think you would want, and maybe this run does come up one round short of where they were a season ago, but I think that this is still major progress for this basketball team. Anthony Edwards, look, he was brilliant in a lot of the games this season, or this series. He had an off night in that game, but he is still great defensively, that he is going to impact games, and he is still the threat on offense. And we talked about it, the fact that he has improved his shooting so much. Last game, not a great example of it, but the fact that he has improved that area of his game to the point that he has means that this kid is going to be very dangerous for a long time. But he is going to need some help, and they got it in that game. Julius Randle may have gotten himself, I am not kidding, I think an extra 0 on his next contract. Like, I think that this guy multiplied what he could get in free agency exponentially, just going right at LeBron. And you could see, like, him facing the Lakers, there was a little extra something to that one, right? Like, that was not a gracious ending. And there is, when you see how it went in New York and everything like that, I think you could see, like, this was, there was a bit on him. but he has turned into the best version of himself. At least he did in this series. You do get concerned about the ball stopping with him a little bit too much, right? Especially when you have Anthony Edwards, who kind of needs to get in that rhythm and be that just linebacker out on the court. But he wasn't just settling for jump shots, and that was the great thing. He was attacking, and he had a matchup where he could attack. LeBron James in his 22nd season is someone that Julius Randle can go at, and that gave him the confidence, and it just got him rolling. So this was the best version of Julius Randle and being that secondary option with Edwards when things kind of go sideways. And then Gobert was exactly what they needed him to be. And it is one thing to just say, yeah, he was facing a small Laker lineup that isn't built to handle things on the interior. But I would just like to remind you that when he was with Utah, those are the types of lineups that played him off the floor. And you got the slightest glimpse of it when the Lakers are shooting their way back into it. I think he was on Rui, and screen is set. So they switch. Reeves is coming around it, and Gobert sinks on it. And that is that's what happened every time with Utah, is you would just put him in the pick and roll, and you either get him away from the rim, and now he is I'm not going to say useless, because he is still a good defensive player, but his strengths are now gone. And so now you have the lane wide open for you to take advantage of things. Or he's going to get into a mismatch against a guard who, while he can kind of handle it a little bit, that's not necessarily where he thrives. And so he sinks off, but it's Reeves who has created nothing off of the dribble. And so it was a mistake. Reeves is able to hit a three. But you start to see that, it's like, okay, this could be a problem, because these are the types of lineups that gave him so much trouble in the past. And now two things happen. One, he has gotten better, and he is able to just take advantage of this. Also, this Minnesota team is, I think, quite superior to what he was dealing with out in Utah when he was coming up. And like the defensive side of everything, like he can come out and switch on a screen and kind of stay up high, because Anthony Edwards isn't getting blown by in the way Donovan Mitchell was, especially in playoff games when those guys were playing together, right? Like, he has more support, so it is more difficult to get to the rim. So, A, it's not as much of a factor. B, if it is, he has time to come back, help, and still make a play. But no, he was everything you could have hoped for Minnesota. And so now going into the next little bit here, I am going to be very fascinated. The next matchup, it's either the Warriors or the Rockets, and we'll talk about that in a second. Both are going to be difficult matchups. And one, I think, presents an interesting option and a unique opportunity for Rudy Gobert. The other, I think, is a really difficult matchup for him, given how well Şengün can handle things and how comfortable he is up high. Both of them, like, both teams have bigs who feel more comfortable outside. No, I'm not going to say Şengün is more comfortable outside, but at least comfortable outside. And going to force Rudy away from the basket. But the size that these guys can put out there in this is really, really interesting. And if they can get through and face Oklahoma City, that size could give OKC some issues as well. So a fascinating Minnesota team. And even if this year doesn't go as far or further than last year did, this is still a team that has solidified that they are for real in the Minnesota Timberwolves. Again, who could they face in the next round? That could have been decided last night, but it wasn't. Before we get into the breakdown of Rockets Warriors, would just love for anyone who is hanging out here today, if you could share this video and share around that we're doing the live streams here on Couch Potato Diary, put it out there, and really trying to grow this thing. And like I said, like I love hanging out in the chat. We got Deeds in the chat earlier over on Twitch. We've had a couple people over on Kick for a couple of times as well. I am very appreciative of everyone who is watching live. I would just like for you guys to have more people to chat with while I'm kind of rambling on and stuff like that. So let's share these videos and spread the word out there. That would really, really appreciate it. The Houston Rockets. I have here, the Rockets ain't nothing to mess with, as they put on an otherworldly game in Game 5 against the Golden State Warriors. And not that you needed to say this about a 2 seed, but this team is for real. And they are a for real problem in the NBA playoffs. I think that they have a incredible base to build around now. And I know if this season ends for them in their next game, there is going to be a lot of discussion about bringing in a superstar, right? Because we're anticipating, and we're going to talk about the Bucks here in a second, we're anticipating Giannis could be available. We are anticipating that someone from Phoenix is going to be available. I would probably stay away from Beal. But you know what I mean? Like Booker or KD could be a big move. And these guys, they have picks and they have a ton of exciting young talent that they can help put everything over the top on. So there's going to be a lot of that, but as they are currently set up, this is a scary, scary basketball team to run into when everything is rolling. And the big key to get everything rolling for them is their point guard, Fred VanVleet. And we saw this with the Raptors in 19. Toronto does not make that run to the championship. Yeah, point to the guy there. You see him. They do not make that run if Fred VanVleet doesn't find another level. And there was a lot of theories at the time that he became a new dad and got that dad strength. But whatever it is back. He has been unconscious from deep. And when he is doing that, combining with the defense that this team can put on, it is so difficult to stop. And they can beat you in so many ways. When they put that big lineup out there where they have Adams and Şengün as the two bigs, just them alone, I think it was like 36% offensive rebound rate, which is silly good. I don't think you could do that 5-on-none with some teams. It is just that they are that good. And then you put the length of Thompson out there, and then basically with anyone, if you want, like Brooks, Smith, whoever, even just Fred VanVleet, who ain't the biggest guy out there, they can just really lock things down. And when Fred is hitting from deep and you really have to pay attention to him, it unlocks the rest of the offense. And that's what's happened in the last couple of games, where it was getting to the point the Warriors were just cheating off of VanVleet because he wasn't making anything. And now he is heat checking them and making some very big shots. And so now you really have to like one-on-one everything. And this Houston team, they still have a little bit of refining offensively to do, but they can be very dangerous, and a lot of smart cuts, a lot of great movement with this team, and a lot of guys who are comfortable handling the ball. I don't know if I would run my entire offense through it, but Şengün has had a couple of very good passes, and being able to distribute in those ways while also being gigantic has caused a few problems for Golden State. So the Warriors, or the Rockets, have kind of found their max level. The other part of it has been the play of Thompson, who is turning into a superstar right in front of our eyes. And people were talking about this all season long. Now that Houston has this national spotlight, we are seeing it. This is one of the best defensive jobs on Steph Curry any one human being has ever done. And that was the key in Game 5, is that they were able to get the ball out of Steph's hands and try to make the other guys beat them. And for a bit, Podziemski is able to make a couple of threes, and Post hits a couple of threes. But with Jimmy Butler still banged up and Draymond being inconsistent on the offensive side, that is like they need the ball in Steph Curry's hands, and Thompson is one of the first ones who has really been able to just one-on-one be able to do that. And now they're throwing help with him as well. I'm understanding it is not just a box and one with him out there, but the work that he has been able to do has really thrown Golden State, or at least it did in Game 5, really threw Golden State off of their game plan. And I can't remember the last time that someone was able to successfully do the someone else beat us with Steph Curry without throwing 4 human beings at him all at one time. That this has been, again, an amazing performance. And like there is, I think, quite a bit of refining that he needs to do on the offensive side. But if he gets that going at all, this kid is scary good and an all-star for a really, really, really long time. And then Şengün, I think when he is distributing well, that unlocks something in the rest of this offense. But they are for real. This isn't just a young team that we're going to see. They were a 2 seed that year, man. I don't know. Like they're not Memphis. Honestly, they're what Orlando should aspire to be, where the defensive part is locked down, but the offense can be really threatening too. On the Golden State side, like they need their best guys to be their best guys. They are not going to win this. While I have liked Hield at times in this series, they are not going to win this if Podziemski and Hield and Post are the ones who are taking all of the shots. This needs to be whatever pelvic contusion Jimmy Butler has, that needs to be fixed here very quickly. They need Butler and they need Curry to both be the best guys, and the Rockets have been phenomenal at taking Curry away. The matchup with Butler can be a little bit more challenging, but that one, that is the one that I think would keep Houston up at night is like Dylan Brooks. He has all the experience. Canadian kid, love the dude. But he has had a couple of times when Jimmy gets going of keeping Butler in front of him, keeping him out of the paint where Jimmy wants to thrive. And he can hit enough from deep that it's a problem. So like Butler, I think has to really get back to being a weapon in this next game 6 here to allow Steph Curry a little bit of room to breathe, at least from just being smothered by Thompson. But again, the moral of this story is the Houston Rockets are a terrifying basketball team to play against right now. If you missed any of anything from this stream, which we're coming up on an hour and a half on the stream here today, first of all, come on, what are we doing? But secondly, you can catch it in podcast form. We are available on Spotify as well as Apple. Just search out Couch Potato Diary. And wherever you get your podcasts. The New York Knicks have a chance to put the Detroit Pistons away tonight. They had a chance to the other night as well, and they lost that game for themselves. Brunson is an unbelievable story. He is a second round pick who, it is the classic, right? He's a second round pick because he's too small. And so Marcus Stroman, height doesn't measure heart, baby. He goes out there, he works his ass off. He turns himself into a really good role player on the Mavericks at just the right time, hits free agency, and he goes to the Mecca, Madison Square Garden, and turns the New York Knicks, one of the marquee franchises of the NBA, but also one of the laughingstocks of the NBA for the better part of 20 years, and turns them into a contender, and shows that he can be a star that you can build around. And he puts together awesome performance after awesome performance after awesome performance. And so I do not want to take away from the overall whatever of Jalen Brunson. And also he is the best player in this series still. But he lost them that game, I think. And we'll talk about the coaching decision in a second, but everything on this offense, and this was one of the frustrations with the Knicks, is that sometimes it can just get a little bit too Brunson takes over. And maybe for a bit he had to do that, but this is not a team that he has to do that on now. Last year, where it is him and basically that is it on the offensive side. Sometimes, no, they had a good team, but then they go out and they get OG Anunoby. And then in the offseason, they go out and get Bridges. And they get Karl Anthony Towns. Sir, you do not have to do this all on your own anymore. In fact, it's better when you don't. When this offense is running and Cat, who has mismatch after mismatch, is knocking down shots. And Bridges is able to attack. And Hart is coming up with some energy plays. And Anunoby is hitting key shots. That's when this thing really starts to thrive, is when everyone is getting involved. You're the linchpin of it and you can go. But the second that it starts to get a little bit wobbly, he just goes into ISO mode. And then he got cold in the game, and it allowed Detroit to get back in it. And you're screaming at the TV, just do something else. The second it goes a little bit off, he just goes, they run ISO through this guy every time, and it wasn't working in that game. And it allowed Detroit to get back into it, and you're pulling your hair out because you know what it's supposed to look like, and you know how good it can look like. And it's not looking like that. And for no other reason than just this guy is just holding on to the basketball. And again, awesome guy. This isn't like it's like McBride going out there and being like, no, guys, I got this one. This is one of the best players in the league who's going out and doing that. And so he is, in some cases, justified in what he is doing. But in other ways, that's not how this team has won these games. And it is, quite honestly, how this team has lost some of their games. And so if you want to drive and kick and Bridges misses an open three, which is happening too much in this series, but if you want to do that and he misses, that ain't on you, my guy. But when you are going out there ISO and missing jump shots, it's not working, and it allowed Detroit to get back into these games. And then the coaching situation late. So for those who didn't watch, Brunson just kind of flashing out on a guy. It's a basketball injury that has happened to basically everyone who has played this sport, where your toe just kind of catches and your ankle kind of just gives a quick over, and it's ow, 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 ow. And all of a sudden, it feels like Thor has just struck your ankle with lightning. That's basically what this was feeling like for him. And so he has to he tries to play through, but hops off. And then there's a loose ball, and Bridges gets dove into or onto or whatever, and he is slow to get up. So they both exit and try to get them back as quickly as they can in what was a very close game. The problem was, for the first time in these playoffs, there was an extended run with no whistles. And so while this is happening, while two of the three most important players on the Knicks are not just on the sideline getting fixed, because that's one thing, they are at the scorer's table ready to check into the game. The Pistons go on a run, and not only do they come back, tie the game, they take the lead, and then they take the lead by multiple possessions, if I remember correctly. And I'm not going to say they put the game away, but all of a sudden there's 35 seconds left, and now you have two guys who can't walk, who now have to come up with magic and make things happen, and almost did but didn't. That's inexcusable. They still had a timeout left. And while I can understand wanting to save a timeout in the foul, free throw, whatever, I still, in the final 2 minutes of this game, want my two best guys out there. Hobbled or not, if I just need them as a distraction so that Cat doesn't get quadruple teamed trying to go to the goal, then fine. But I need those guys out there and actively doing something. And there's a bit of it where you can see, like, okay, we're still ahead. Maybe we're buying a couple extra moments and a few extra steps on these injured body parts for these guys. But once it gets just a little bit wobbly, you gotta call that timeout and get these guys out there. Like, I would rather go down with the ship with my guys even a little bit banged up in the final couple of minutes than whatever was happening there with the Knicks. And it just took all the momentum out of the game, took all the air out of that building in Madison Square Garden, which is really hard to do that in a playoff game. And it gave the Detroit Pistons some life. So, look, the Pistons have been good. The Knicks lost that game, I think, with some not great coaching from Tibbs. It's funny. You never would have thought that with the way the regular season has gone, that saying, oh, you know what? Tibbs sat his guys just a little bit too much. You never would have thought that would have been the criticism, but that's what we had coming out of that one. But again, credit to Detroit. They're going to continue to grow from this. Cade, it does feel like every game they start, they are like, oh my God, what do we do? Like they get bright-eyed for every game, and then they settle in and start to make a game of it. But it's like every game, New York gets off to a good start. Pistons can't hit anything. Cade looks like he's playing with the wrong hand out there. And then he's like, oh, right, I'm, at worst, the second best player in this series, so I'm just going to be awesome for a bit. That cool? And then Beasley will hit a couple shots, and they'll work their way back into it. This is a fantastic learning experience for these guys. And for Cade Cunningham, solidifying himself as at least worthy of the hype that we had for him a little bit and getting Detroit basketball back on the map. The other desperation one tonight is the LA Clippers, as they will try to survive against the Denver Nuggets. There isn't a whole lot to break down from that Game 5. Denver was just awesome. And they were awesome in the way that they need to be to win these games. Jokic is obviously best player in the world, right? We agree on that? Cool. He needs help. And this game, he got help. When Murray is firing like that, I don't want to say that's all they need, but that is really close to all they need, is just Jokic and someone else. And the problem, like, he can do that someone else thing better than anyone else can, right? Like, if it's Christian Brown, you kind of need Christian Brown and a little bit more from Gordon or MPJ or Westbrook, right? But when it's Murray, it can just be Murray. And so he goes out there, lights it up for 40, and you can tell immediately, like, oh, this guy's not missing tonight. And he's going out there, and it's the arrow thing, and it's all that. Like, he is just on another level. And then he's taking on Kawhi defensively and all that. Like, that was the type of performance that you need from Jamal Murray. And then it starts to feed into everyone. Westbrook's hitting a 3 and he's banking 2 balls, and Brown is hitting a 3. MPJ has probably his second best game of the series, and Gordon is making some big high flying plays as well. Like, there's just a lot to get excited about on the Denver side, and it starts to kind of snowball on them. So Jokic is obviously the best player in this series, and thusly the most important. But if Denver is going to win again, it is going to be Jamal Murray, who I think has to be that next X factor that gets them there. And then, like, for the Clippers, they battled in that game. It's just they couldn't stop that. And so what do you do, right? Because the big thing is, well, let's take the ball out of Jokic's hands. Like, okay, fine. But when it's going into the hands of guys who are scoring 40, how do we stop that? And, like, you can try to challenge Murray, but he is so dangerous off the hop that he'll just blow past you and get to the rim. And then you're putting Zubats in a tough spot because you either have Jokic dragging him up high, so, okay, we're going to try to pin down with him, help out, and now we're kicking it out. And so we have willfully allowed them to give the ball to the best player in the world, or this guy has an uncontested ba-boom at the rim and shit. You know, so this is, when they are great, they are still so tough to stop. It is just so much more has to go right for Denver to be great in that. But when they are difficult. And so aside from using a chair, I don't know what the Clippers could have done more in that one. It will be interesting, though, to see kind of how they counteract this coming up in in game 6. And also it will be interesting. Well, this season, again, it's kind of a little bit like the Lakers one, but not so much, where this has gone better than expected this year for the Clippers, right? One of my locks at the beginning of the year was Clippers under, because I was like, well, Kawhi's going to miss a ton of time, and it's James Harden running things. I'm sorry, I've seen that before. But James Harden kind of found the best-ish version of himself for what he can be now. And then you get a lot, Zubats turns into an all-defensive player. Powell turns into a really strong depth piece for this team. And then Kawhi comes back, and it all fits, and they turn into a very dangerous team. And so, on the one hand, you have seen that this still can work in a high-level way. When George left, it kind of felt like they were trying to be half pregnant, where it was, we're trying to stay competitive. We have Kawhi. We have this new arena. We're trying to do something here, but we're not going to go all the way with it because we kind of know what we have. And so you're just kind of stuck as this team that's going to lose in the first round a bunch. And now they might, but it feels like there's more hope in LA with the Clippers than there was a time before. That being said, basically every playoff series the Clippers have lost in the Kawhi era, Kawhi was on the bench in street clothes at the end of it. And so it feels like a waste to have that guy playing that well still and lose out in the first round. So one of these teams is going to be very disappointed at how this series ends up based on the talent that they have. It's why it's been the best matchup in the playoffs so far, and that continues at least for one more night. The postseason does not continue for the Milwaukee Bucks. A horrendous loss to close things out. This was a couple days ago, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it since. Just inexcusable. Up 118-111 with 40 seconds to go in overtime, and the Bucks lose. Unimaginable to have that happen. And you feel awful for Gary Trent Jr., who was the reason that game got to overtime. He was on fire. And the reason they were up, that they gave up the first basket of OT, I believe it was, and then didn't give up another one for a bit because Trent Jr. is just three ball, bang, and just rolling right through them. But then rolling right through them is not intentional, but quite the phrase for it, because he takes the pass and it just right through the wickets. And out of bounds it goes, and it gives Indy life, and they don't give it up. And credit the Pacers for taking advantage, credit that home court for getting them into it, but that is multiple turnovers in those spots for what is supposed to be a veteran team. And I get, Gary Trent Jr. is not how could he possibly have, right? He is the role guy. And it's AJ Green wasn't there before, but this is still this is Giannis, this is Lopez, this is Prince, this is those guys who have been in some high level spots before. This is not supposed to happen to this team. And it did. And that is a very big concern. So again, look, this is not going to quiet the where is Giannis going to go thing, because this was an inexcusable way to end the season. And one that really makes you, given how the Lillard injury goes down, he's out for a while now. And now how is someone his age, his size, going to respond to that is going to be obviously very key, but also not something I would just be banking on at this point. And Giannis, he has his championship. He likes it in Milwaukee, but is it time to move on into something else? Because he was spectacular. All series long, he was great. And it feels like a waste to have him out in 5 games and to have him out in these ones. The one thing that would maybe give you a little bit of oh, okay. And maybe not, look, he still might want out. But the thing with Halliburton's dad where Halliburton's dad's getting right in his face. Last 2 years, we've talked about the press conferences with Giannis, and it's what is a failure? I don't consider basketball, there is no failures, and those sorts of things, right? And if I'm a Bucks fan, it's hey man, thanks for the title, but what the fuck are you talking about? We're supposed to be a championship team around the first round. that feels like a failure to me. This was not that press conference. This was what? I've won titles, he hasn't. What is he talking about? And so there was a little bit of this guy this season has remembered how good he is. And so I don't know if there needs to be something else. Well, if he's going to stay in Milwaukee, it has to look a lot different around him this upcoming season. Like, I think you have to, and again, not to fall into the traps that we talked about before, where star players and teams with them tend to fuck it up because they just get desperate. But you have to surround this guy with more talent than you have right now. And that is even if Lillard comes back at the peak of his powers. It still wasn't enough with him. That this is a poorly constructed basketball team, and you cannot have that when that guy is still in his prime. On the Pacers side of it, like, just some credit to them. They put a ton of pressure on Milwaukee and forced all of those turnovers and put them in a spot where they were able to battle back and win the game. Halliburton has been quiet in these games and then kind of picked his spots, and he came up huge. He was really good. You could tell he was embracing the limelight with this and kind of embracing this whole thing and kind of playing into his WWE fandom a little bit with some of that. But he really found it in this series again, and that makes this team very dangerous. And again, it is kind of similar to Minnesota. These guys might not make it as far as they did a season ago because the bracket kind of broke their way, and it's a tough matchup against Cleveland here in the next round. But this is a better basketball team than the one that played a season ago, and one that I think can now sustainably put on a run. I didn't think that from Indiana going into this year, that they could really be a team that could sustain it, because it was all offense, right? And eventually that gets shut down and you just run into better basketball teams. But now, with how well they play defensively and just the effort that they have out there, they are not, like, this isn't the Pacers Pistons from the Reggie Miller era and the brawls and all of that, but this is still a fine defensive team that at least can make you work. And it's not just bucket. Who's going to miss first? It's not that. This team defends really hard and pretty well. And they also have now, I think, a little bit more going on offense. Halliburton is great. Turner, you know what he is at this point. He is a stretch five that can be just an absolute backbreaker. But they figured out how to work Siakam into this offense. And then the big one is the step that Nembhard has taken this year. There are times he has, like, we talk about irrational confidence. I don't know how irrational it is with him, but there are some times he's like, no, I'm the best player on the floor right now. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to be the best player on the floor. And he has that, and he just executes all the time. And so when he is scoring at that level, and you have all those guys you need to worry about, this becomes a very difficult team to deal with. And then they defend very well. And again, it is not a picture perfect whatever, but they force a lot of steals, and it gets their offense into a rhythm, and it gets them into being a very, very dangerous team. So I don't know if they can hang with the Cleveland Cavaliers in that series, but I think that they can hang with them a whole lot better than they would have a season ago. One more thing to talk about here on the show today. Again, thank you all so much for hanging out with me on the live stream and for popping up if you're watching afterwards. But we got one more thing to touch on, and we're going to go to the world of baseball. It's the Toronto Blue Jays. They got a win. We'll talk about why this one felt pretty important. At least some of the key players in it do. Any chance I get to talk about the Blue Jays and use that intro, I'm going to take it. That is my absolute favorite. So Alejandro Kirk gets a big night and comes up with a walk-off win as the Toronto Blue Jays come from behind for a phenomenal victory. One game after getting just shit kicked by the Boston Red Sox. This is so needed for Toronto. The win in general felt very important as one at the end of April can feel. But it is the way, the come from behind, and also the guy doing it. We have talked about how this offense needs somebody to step up, and Alejandro Kirk is very uniquely qualified to be that somebody. We talked about him in guys who could have a bit of a breakout type of a season. It's just every broadcast you hear, when Kirk comes up, it's like, man, this guy just knows how to hit. And sometimes it is a guy from Minnesota who has watched 8 innings of Blue Jays baseball all season, but talks to a guy and looks at the things like, oh, wow, this guy hit 312 as a rookie. And you know what? You don't expect it because he is kind of... But this guy can really take advantage of things. Like, boy, he has really found it. and you're not necessarily watching it all the time, but he does. He has a skill set and an ability to just kind of take over for a little bit and just get hot at the right time offensively. And they are in such desperate need of that happening because of how bad this lineup has been all season long, basically, for the Blue Jays. And so, like, he is just on fire with exit velocities and everything like that. Like, this feels, I don't know if it's a season-long thing that he's going to hit, like, 40% of his balls at 100 miles an hour, but he has the talent and he has the ability to go on a 30 to 50 game run of just being an awesome hitter and giving this lineup at least a little bit of a spark behind Vladdy and helping it out. And now, as he pointed out in the social media video, which made me a little annoyed when Santander went, "Hey, April's over." It's like, dude, you know that this is a problem. Why is it? And again, if he's mashing home runs in October, I'll be fine with it. But it's like, can we not spread it out a bit? But if Santander does magically get his powers back from the Monstars who take it and only allow him to be good in May, if he can get that and Vladdy continues to be Vladdy, now all of it, this is not the Yankees or anything like that. But it's not the Mariners or, like it's not the White Sox now. If you have Vladdy and you have Kirk and you have Santander going, George Springer has certainly started to attack things, or has been attacking things really well. You've been getting quite a bit from him. And we said it before, Bo is hitting the hell out of the baseballs. It's just a real remarkable run of bad luck. You can, again, start to squint and see where this offense can at least be average and help it out. But Kirk is such an important part of that. And so for him to come up and get that win is very big. Now, because I am a Blue Jays fan and have been for the entirety of my 35 and basically now a half years on this planet, I am just wired to be negative about it in a little bit. And so here is where I have some worry. Jeff Hoffman is on an unreal run with the Blue Jays. And he has been everything you could have wanted and more. And I had said that I thought the Blue Jays needed one more guy at the top of that and have Hoffman be your 8th inning guy, have a closer in the 9th, and boom, you got a really, really strong bullpen. And it turns out they needed a guy or two, but in the middle relief part, not at the top, because Hoffman has been closer extraordinaire so far. The problem is they are using him a lot at the start of this season. And it's a lot for a guy who Baltimore failed on a physical before Toronto signed him. Now, I think that was more a Baltimore thing than it was a Hoffman thing. Like, he seems fine. And if there was a real problem, the Blue Jays wouldn't have signed it. Although it'd be quite the strategy to be like, look, there's only, like, we know this thing, that there's some problems with it. So we're going to ride this thing into the ground and just get as much out of it as we can. That'd be quite the thing. But it almost feels like that's what they're doing. I'm being sarcastic on that. I'm not accusing the Blue Jays of just trying to ruin a guy's elbow so they can win some games in April. But that all being said, like, he has been excellent. And the thing is that they've kind of needed him. And that is the bigger overall point. It is not like gasp, hand to chest, what are we doing with Jeff Hoffman? But it is just like, man, it would be nice if you didn't need him this much. And that's the problem with this Blue Jays team, is that, like, that they have been getting this great performance, and that's awesome. But it's that they have been needing him to go multiple innings and a ton of pitches in these games and trying to work as hard as he can to grind through just to help them hold on to a one-run win or something along those lines. That's a lot. And so I do think that there needs to be a bit of an urgency from the front office, and they have been better this year about, okay, if you're not working, you're out of here. The problem is they haven't found another one to come in and start working. So there is, I think, a bit of frustration on that side of it from a Blue Jays standpoint. I do like the urgency early in the year. We talked about how important it was for the Blue Jays to get off to a good start. And as the calendar flips over to May, it is a fine start. It is not a, oh man, here come the Blue Jays, but it's not a, okay, so who all are we trading now? They have shown they can at least be competitive in the American League this season. And so they needed to do that. And so I do appreciate that they are coaching with the urgency that is required for the situation that this team is in. I just don't want it to mean that by the time September comes around, little is closing games because they had to blast through Hoffman's arm to save them a bunch in April. So the urgency is great. And I do like that they are attacking this because we saw in 2021 when they missed the playoffs playoffs by a game. You can go back and pinpoint a lot of games where you lost it because of a bullpen this or a mismanaged that or whatever. And maybe this is Schneider. He has overlearned from the sins of the past and has figured out, like, hey, I'm just going to let my best pitchers stay in as long as possible, and we're just going to try to maximize things that way. I think this is now a message to the front office, who, got a little bit of goodwill, keeping Vladdy around for a long time, and now apparently Kirk too, but they need more help in that bullpen because Hoffman cannot keep this up all season long, and you should not need him to all season long. But a good win for the Blue Jays and one to get excited about. Because it kind of shows a few things that if it continues to go that way, you're going to feel really good about. That's going to do it for the stream today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Again, I know this was a bit of a long one, and I'm going to try to get better about the starts. I know that it takes a little bit to get into these, and so I am very, very sorry about that. But going to try to tighten that up here as we go forward. But thank you for hanging out. Again, youtube.com/@CouchPotatoDiary, twitch.tv/PrimetimePK, and kick.com/PrimetimePK. Love hanging out with you guys. Love doing the shows live. If you're listening in podcast form, you can get these early if you tune in live on any of the places I just mentioned. If having me in your pocket is more your speed and you want to catch these in podcast form, you can do that. Available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And again, we cover a lot of ground on these shows. If you just want the hockey, if you just want the basketball, just want the baseball, it took too long, but we got the playlists up now. You can just run through a lot of the talk in the sports that you like there. I believe that's going to be the last stream of the week. It's a busy weekend for your boys, so got a few extra things to take care of, so I don't think we're going to do the video game thing today. I might be able to, so keep it logged on my socials. I'm at Primetime Klein on all social platforms, and that will let you know when I am going live with the video game stuff. But assume that we're not going to be back until Monday at noon, when we will have a ton of awesome boxing to break down. We will have... we'll have figured out a lot. Think of, by the time Monday comes around, everything that we will have learned about the Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets and the Golden State Warriors, and maybe still about the Toronto Blue Jays when we reconvene on Monday. So thank you guys so much. Again, check out Sea of Dead, seaofdead403.ca. It's Calgary based, obviously. We've got the Calgary Cannons hat or whatever, but even if you're not a Calgary person, there's some really cool stuff on there. If you're a wrestling fan, Stampede Wrestling is the place to be. Obviously, look, we're repping this city. We love Calgary. But there's some stuff for those of you from out of town as well. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. Have a great rest of your Thursday into the weekend, and we'll talk again next week. I am out.